Hi, everyone. Thanks a lot for taking the time to join our webinar today, where we will look into moving from KPI to ROI with tech, tools, and insights. So let's just start with a short introduction. I'm Thomas Silokas. I'm here from Similarweb, and here with me, I have Sam Fenton Elstone, CEO and founding partner at Anything is Possible. And Sam, it would be great if you can just give us a short introduction to what you and company focuses on, what you guys do.
Thanks, Thomas. Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us over the next half an hour or so as I take you through my presentation. So as Thomas said, my name's Sam. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a media, creative and technology agency called Anything is Possible. We're based out of the UK with offices in London and Brighton. We launched the business 2 years ago, 2018, and we've grown to around 25 people and delivering campaigns across the globe. Our business really specializes on bringing together three core elements of marketing communications. That's a blend of great media distribution, creative development and platforms underpinned by smart use of data and technology. And I'm looking forward to sharing with you a provocation and some insights into how we go about delivering our services.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Thanks, Sam, for introduction. I think we can go through shortly what we're going to cover today. And first, we'll start where we've been, the great onboarding. Then we'll look into where we are now and look into agency as infrastructure. And for the last part, we'll look into from KPI to ROI to actual the reason of this presentation. So just one thing I'd like to remind you guys, and one of the main reasons we have these webinars live and not as a recording is that we want it more to be a discussion and give you an opportunity to ask questions. So please use the Q&A box just down below on your screen, and please ask us questions. So we'll try and answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation. And Sam, please take it from here and show us how it's done.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Thomas. So just let me see if I can share my screen. This is the first test.
Yeah, I think you should be able to do it now.
Okay.
Perfect.
You see my screen?
Yes, we can see the screen.
Okay, good. And let me just present. Perfect. How's that looking?
Looks beautiful. Good. I love the chicken.
Love the chicken. This is a very bright and pretty presentation, so hopefully it brightens your day. The first thing I'm going to flag, it's a very lonely place presenting a webinar when you're in full screen, because I can't see any of you. I can't even see Thomas anymore. So anyone who is out there, do feel free to ask questions and to chip in when you can, because it's really nice if it's a conversational piece. Over the next half an hour or so, I hope to leave you with a bit of a provocation, a call to arms, as it will, for agencies to position themselves as invaluable partners in a modern marketing communications ecosystem. So for any of you that are working for agencies, hopefully there'll be some elements in there that you can take away and apply to your business. Anyone who's running agencies, likewise. But if any of you are at brands and you work with agencies as partners, and hopefully you can take some of what I'm saying and use that to lean into your current relationships and drive more value from those. Just click through. So just as Thomas alluded to, there's three sections to the presentation today that I'm going to take you through. And really the first is to reflect back on what has been a momentous last 6 months or so. The words I could have used to describe it are probably often overused as it started. So I'm using the phrase "the great onboarding" as an innovative and more positive way to describe the journey that we've been on since the world had to face up to what was a rather shocking situation with COVID-19 and what that means for us. And then I'm going to talk about where I think we are as marketeers, as agencies and as brands, and the need to focus on customer centricity and storytelling to succeed. And then ultimately, I'm going to end the session with my view on how we can shift the focus and the measurement of our effectiveness as marketeers from KPI to ROI. And just to start, I wanted to reflect back on a conversation that I think has been often had in the marketing sector. And as an agency owner and as a founder, this is obviously very close to my heart, which is reports of the agency model dying, the demise of the agency. You know, I would challenge that profusely, and in as much as that it's not just been over exaggerated, but actually is pretty false, because actually with the complexity that we see in the world today, agencies have the opportunity to reposition themselves as more vital than ever before. So what can you take away? So I split this out into two, making some assumptions that you might be working for different types of organizations. So little cheat sheet, if you're pressed for time, you don't need to bother with the rest of the presentation. This is all you need to know. That's a joke. You shouldn't leave now. It gets much better. But for agencies, if you're working for agencies, you know, my provocation here is that you need to lean in and look at where your skills are truly adding value in changing times to the brands that we're working with. And that might not be what's immediately obvious, and it might not be what your core offering as an agency currently sits at. For brands and marketeers who work with agencies, you should be looking to challenge your partners to leave their comfort zones and help you face some of the challenges that have come to your business today, and help you execute against some of the opportunities that this new normal may have presented for you. But before I go into that, we're going to do a little bit of a warm-up. Now, this always works really, really well when I'm in a room with people. I've not done it on a webinar on Zoom where I can't see any of you, but my marketing manager, Rob, assures me that this cannot fail. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and normally I'd say raise your hand. You can't raise your hand, but Thomas did reflect that there is a Q&A box, so perhaps you could comment in the Q&A box and give me an understanding of your response to the question. So, warm-up question. Does anybody know these brands that I'm about to share? The first one, which is ALOC Industries, or ALOC Industries. I'll give you a moment to reflect. No Googling.
Yeah, guys, you can use the chat to actually say, I know, or I know, and we can basically see how many people will respond, and I can tell Sam.
Okay, that's the silence of busy minds.
Yeah, I don't think anyone knows that. No,
Well,
I can see a couple of responses that no,
yeah.
they don't know who that is.
Okay, well, if I'd given you their full name, it may have given away part of the answer. So their full name is ALOC Industries, Innovative Textile Solutions. They were founded in 1983 and have been the largest producer of face masks for a considerable amount of time. But by golly, their world has changed in the last few months. They've bumbled along being a market leader in an industry that really focused on healthcare and focused on niche parts of social understanding and social consciousness. Suddenly they've been propelled into the mainstream. And if you think about it, it's hugely significant for their brand story, but also brands and people that interact with them on a daily basis. So, you know, face masks are no longer just to preserve for the healthcare industry. They've actually become a fashion item to many. In the UK, you cannot wear a face mask. You can't enter a shop unless you're wearing a face mask. And that's meant that, you know, now when you leave home, you have to have your mobile phone, but you also have to have your face mask. Otherwise, you can't go about your daily business. And intriguingly and interestingly, you know, people are now buying face masks that are branded, and even at a designer brand level. Burberry released their face mask over the last few weeks, priced at £90, which is a significant investment, and undoubtedly it says something about the person who's wearing that. And beyond that, you also get the culture war. between those who refuse to wear face masks and those who see it as an affront to humanity that they're not wearing face masks. But ultimately, this huge shift has presented a whole new narrative for brands to operate, particularly ALOC, as their story shifts far more from where they've ever been before. So second question, maybe this one's a little easier. Has anybody ever heard of Fastly?
Again, guys, you can comment in Q&A or the chat. Oh yeah, we have Karina who's saying she's heard of Fastly. Yeah, we have a couple of responses, and
Great.
a couple saying no. Yeah.
Okay, great. So Fastly are the cloud support system behind some of the most well-known, well-used digital brands that we all know and love. And our interactions with digital have also changed considerably since earlier this year, as the restrictions on our movement shifted from no longer being able to go to the gym, resulting into our parks being full of people running and tracking themselves on Strava, to everybody working remotely, using Slack to communicate with their peers, or people looking to develop their understanding, develop their knowledge and their training and development through platforms like Udemy. The requirements for the services of all of these brands have gone through the roof, and the requirements, therefore, for Fastly has significantly exploded as well. And perhaps one of their most well-known brands that they support is Shopify, who have seen traffic almost grow by 70% from February through to July this year, and ultimately has presented itself as the infrastructure for e-commerce that's for all brands that sit outside of the behemoth that is Amazon. So the final one before we get into it, has anybody ever heard of Novavax?
So yeah, we had 3 yeses on, I think 4 yeses on the previous one, and now we have no, yes, one more no, and one more no. Yeah, so this one, I think people don't know as much.
Okay. Well, some of you might have got the clue from the name, potentially, if you say it out loud. Novavax is a company that's been around since the 80s, and they develop vaccines for all sorts of viruses and diseases that the world has faced. Now, this graph on the screen at the moment is showing you their share price, and you can see it bump late last year as the COVID outbreak first hit our news stories. It bumped again in March as much of the Western world started to shut down, and it's significantly grown as positive news stories have come out around the development of the vaccine, but crucially also the demand for their services. And actually, it's been a really interesting time for Novavax, so much so that we'll talk about them a little bit later. But it was recently announced last week that Canada is set to invest significant amounts of their COVID-19 budget in the vaccine that they are developing alongside J&J, as well as the US government pushing a significant amount of funding into the organization to develop to support the work that they're putting into developing the vaccine as it stands. What's incredible is that as their share price rockets and as prominence of the organization scales to the point where people around the world are starting to recognize them as a brand, they still only remain at 400 employees. So why do you think I've started a presentation about marketing with these brands? Well, they tell us something really interesting about our current moment, a moment which has seen a significant amount of change for all of us, be it on a human level or a brand level. Because 6 months ago, they were all good brands. They were market leaders within relatively niche industries, but today they've broken out of that story. They now are vital infrastructure, not just for the niches that they work in, but actually for all of us sat on this call as consumers, as people, and as a society as a whole. Ultimately, this has a huge significance for their marketing and communication challenge. Each of those brands that I've talked about, they've had a complete shift in what their story is and how they should be communicating their story to their audience and to their consumers. And it's also significantly changed the story for brands that interact with them and for all of us that interact on a day-to-day level. And so this is what brings me to the concept of the great onboarding. It's to describe the process that we have embarked upon over the last few months of 2020. But it also gives us a good indication of where we're going. And it reminds us of a story here, Anything is Possible. We talked about the impact that the railroad and the railway made on the Victorian era. So back in the Victorian days, when train technology was new, people were truly afraid of the speeds with which the trains of the day could carry people, up to a whopping 25 miles an hour. It was truly terrifying. People felt that bodies couldn't handle it, that it was a risk not worth taking, even in the name of progress. And whilst we've come on a long way from 25 miles an hour, you know, it is true to say that there have been some tragic and terrible train accidents, but I don't think any of us would agree with the fact that they have outweighed the positives that rail technology has brought the world. It's been a hugely significant change in human history and has brought a huge amount of benefits to our world. And I would suggest that actually we're following a similar sort of process. The time that we're going through is restructuring our world, it's restructuring how brands need to operate and how brands need to talk to consumers. And actually, as we look back on this year, we'll look back and wonder how we ever operated in a world prior to 2020 and prior to the Great Onboarding. Because in 2020 and the Great Onboarding, it was the year where finally everyone everywhere went digital. And it's funny that I should be saying that, because I've probably sat through multiple presentations where we talk about the year of the mobile or the year of this and the year of that. But truly, it has taken something very physical and non-digital to actually shape much of the Western world to embrace digital technologies that they've been flirting with for a long time, but finally have changed established and traditional behaviors. So I don't know if anyone recognizes this. I've got this written down here so I can remember it. So it is the AT&T picture phone Mod 2 from the 1970s. It's a beaut, right? So this video phone is over 50 years old. The concept of video phone has existed for even longer, but an actual video phone has been around for 50 years. But really, have we embraced video phones? I would say it's taken a virus that has spread across the world for us truly to finally make that leap and to move from the established behaviours of speaking to people on the phone without video as a complement, or actually meeting face to face and actually seeing this technology for what it is, something that can truly connect people in an empowering and valuable way. And you know, the fact that we're delivering this on Zoom is testament to that, because Zoom has been a huge beneficiary of the current situation. If we look at this data taken from Similarweb, we can see that there's been a huge growth in the amount of traffic that Zoom has taken through to its platform, starting really in March, as I said, as the world started to restrict movement, and then continue throughout that. And whilst we are seeing that level off a wee bit as the world and travel starts to flex, it's now established at a much greater degree of normality and usage across society than ever had been achieved before. And if you follow that story further, you obviously see that actually not only is it the traffic to Zoom and the usage of Zoom that's grown, but of course their revenue has rocketed. And when you look at year on year, quarterly growth, the numbers are mightily impressive, particularly for Q2. And what I find super interesting is when you look at the search data from Similarweb, the growth is exponential. In Jan 2020, 4 million searches. March 2020, 83 million searches. April 2020, 151 million searches. And what's so really interesting about this is Zoom has managed to jump out of the category. Zoom now is greater than the video phoning category. Whether you are a child at school, at kindergarten, doing their remote lessons, or whether it's your gran who's connecting with their family, we all know how to Zoom. We all know how to tell somebody that they're on mute. And some of us even know how to put on our Zoom backgrounds to add a bit of fun into the conversations. And so Zoom has done what Hoover's done for vacuum cleaners, or what Google has done for search, and the brand now dominates the category. And there's a word for this, funnily enough, and it's one of those words which is really lovely to write down and really terrible to say because I can never pronounce it correctly. So I'm going to give it a go. Anthemeria. I think that's right, Rob. Yeah, anthemeria. So what that means is when a brand or a word is able to translate from a noun into a verb. And ultimately, you could argue that almost every brand is seeking to do that in some form or other. So looking beyond video, shopping is another category that has seen profound changes driven by a physical restriction in how we behave and how we move. If you look here, we can see that monthly visits have increased by over 1 billion in a matter of months to key major retailers here in the UK, including Amazon, Ocado, ASOS, and eBay. And actually, there's been a huge shift in what home delivery means. Home delivery used to be a premium convenience restricted to certain types of products, and it's become an essential for millions now. It's finally broken through to a point of critical mass in grocery, and it has enabled Jeff Bezos to accumulate wealth that is unimaginable prior to the lockdown process. And if you look at the subsidiary industries for that delivery, such as the work that people like Deliveroo, Uber, and Grub in Asia do, it's provided opportunities for people who perhaps were restricted in their ability to earn employment as traditional user behaviours and traditional human behaviours were restricted due to COVID. So many people switched employment from service industries such as restaurants, etc., into delivery jobs and roles employed by this new way of behaving and this new norm. So why am I telling you this? Well, we're at a moment which has seen a huge shift, a dramatic shift in how people behave, and that has created a huge opportunity for some brands, perhaps an opportunity that they didn't ever foresee coming. Whether ALOC Industries ever felt that they were going to be the market leader in such a world-dominating sector as face masks, I highly doubt. But alas, that's where they are. And so when you're faced with that level of opportunity, you've got a decision to make. Do you face that opportunity now and let it pass you by, or do you try and take advantage of it and try and build on it? And in order to build on that, you need to have a great brand strategy. And that's where agencies can come in and to help you grow and develop and progress that into something that is more lasting than a moment that comes and goes. And there are 3 positive elements to delivering a great brand strategy. The first is differentiation, making sure that you can clearly describe eloquently why your brand is different from those who you compete with. It's being relevant to people and to the needs and to the challenges that consumers face. And it's providing value, not just here today, but in the long term, so that people can trust and believe in the brands and the products that you offer. And so for an agency, this is our bread and butter. But the crucial element here is for us to move beyond becoming experts in distribution, being experts in channel specialisms, and to focus on being customer centric. Being customer centric allows us to deliver against the KPIs that we need to deliver against, but in a world that is far more complex and agile than it's ever been before. But the bit where we can really add value, where we can position ourselves as vital infrastructure and help our brands position themselves as vital infrastructure, is in their ability to tell their story of their brand and of their product. From just a few of the examples that I've shared with you over the last few minutes, we can already see that the world has become potentially a lot more complex than it was just a few months ago, and that there are already a number of new stories that are here waiting to be told. The crucial thing is to recognise that the tools that we're using today to tell these stories have changed. I wanted to share with you some platforms that I think are interesting in terms of the ability for an agency or for a brand to tell their story, and it'd be remiss for me not to mention Similarweb, as this is their webinar. So I've stuck that logo in there, but no. Similarweb is a fantastic platform to measure the web, but actually now it measures much more than that, because so much of our behavior has shifted online, so much of our interactions are now digital. Similarweb becomes an insight into human behavior much more than it's ever been before. And it allows us to understand the shifting patterns at a global level of what people are doing, why they're doing it, and how they're doing it. From an agency's perspective, there's an opportunity to craft that data and harness that data into value proposition products. And there's a couple I've put on screen here, which I won't dwell on, but Insights and Aware are two products that we've used to help craft narrative and explain stories on behalf of our brands, and to harness search and social data to understand how humans behave in a way that is more insightful and more valuable data that brands can use to shape their decision making. Beyond that, I think there are some really interesting brands that are delivering platforms that can enable brand stories to be told more innovatively than ever before. A UK brand called A Million Ads. A Million Ads allow digital audio ads to be personalised based on the audience and the person that's listening to them. It enables an advertiser to create an ad that can relate to a specific person's name, their location, their age, the weather, whatever it is that enables them to be more relevant to that particular person. It gives them the ability to move away from delivering one audio ad to millions, to a million audio ads to individuals. It presents a fantastic example of how technology can help us to deliver better stories. And a fantastic organisation called Good Loop, who are effectively an advertising for good organisation. They present video advertising on behalf of brands, and they give people the opportunity to choose whether to watch that ad or not. And in return for their attention, they make a donation to charities. Fantastic use of advertising and technology to bring a positive brand story to the world. But telling stories, crucially, does not mean making things up. That would be telling tales. The building blocks of the stories that we do tell are the data and the insight that we can craft them from. And this is something that has never changed. The stories that we've always told as people have always been based on the data points that we know and a true insight that joins us all together. But the exciting thing is the amount of data and the amount of insight that we now have in front of us. Because of the great onboarding, and because that everybody has been driven to digital, there's a whole new set of digital footprints that we're able to follow. It all sits there in front of us, and the skill for the agencies of today are in their ability to uncover it, or as Michelangelo used to do, to craft the sculpture from the block of marble that already sat there. So I just want to come back to Novavax again and to see if there's a story there in terms of their current opportunity at this moment and whether they can turn that into something of momentum. So I think potentially that they are the brand story of 2020. They are a small Midwestern pharmaceutical company in the US of 400 people, but they have been propelled to global prominence because of a situation that many didn't see coming and was definitely not of their doing. They're competing alongside established players like Johnson & Johnson to sell their products to G8 countries across the world. If we look at Similarweb, there are some really interesting insights in there. Since February 2020, their traffic has increased approximately 400%, give or take. Now that's really, really interesting. But when you dive into it a little bit more, there are some more powerful insights that we can pull apart on that. The first is that obviously a huge amount of their traffic is coming from COVID-19. That's pretty obvious. It's not a surprise. But what is interesting is that whilst they're getting a huge amount of traffic from that, their traffic is dwarfed by the traffic obtained from news corporations and publishers who are responding to the consumer and public need for information around vaccines and the whole current situation that we're facing. Diving into it a wee bit more, and this is where it gets really interesting. In the top left of this quite busy chart, you can see their traffic for Novavax.com at a global level. For pretty much all of the last 5 years or so, desktop traffic has dominated the visits to their website. Now, the reason that you can infer for this is that Novavax as a website and as a brand has been very much focused on a specific industry and is very much a professional use case. Nobody ever really heard of the brand or interacted with the brand until COVID came along. But towards the end of last year, we see that their traffic has grown exponentially. And for the first time, mobile starts to grow even more quickly and now represents a huge proportion of their traffic, way more than it's ever presented in the past. Now that can represent the fact that Novavax has broken out of its rather niche past and has taken mainstream consciousness. Novavax is now a brand that many people across the world who've never engaged with vaccines, who've never engaged with pharmaceutical organizations may have heard of and care about and want information from. But there's a problem. Their mobile experience isn't good enough. Their mobile experience bounce rate is significantly higher than their desktop bounce rate. The website doesn't perform well enough and their content isn't optimized for the stories and the information that people are looking for. So is Novavax on the cusp of anthemia? Can they make the story stick, or is this just going to be an opportunity that's going to pass them by? Well, it's hard to say, but there are some things that they could do. There are some practical things that they could do through optimizing their search, be it through paid search or SEO, to capture more of the traffic that's going to alternative news sources. They should look to develop their content and their PR around the details behind the vaccine that they're developing and the information that people are looking for. But crucially, and I think that this is the interesting part, is they need to recognize that they now have a whole new audience, and that's the audience of the consumer, not of the medical professionals that they may have been selling their vaccine to in the past. And in recognizing that, they need to understand that they need to create a new brand experience and a new brand story for that new audience. So what does that mean for brands and for agencies? I'm going to bring this to a close now. The point I'd like to leave you with is that tech and data, for me, are now the words and the grammar of the narratives that we're here to tell. The fact is that stories have always been a tool to enable humans to understand the world and to process thought. But now in agencies and in brands, telling those stories means that we need to be technologists first. Ultimately, every successful agency that succeeds post the great onboarding of 2020 needs to be a tech giant in micro. They need to be able to add value above and beyond the major platforms and provide true insight into digital understanding. And so my recommendations and takeaways are that if you're an agency sat here giving me some of your time, or even if you're a brand, there are three things I think you need to do. The first is to hire and empower data storytellers. Data storytellers have the ability to chisel away at all of the data and find the insight that enables you to uncover new and powerful user behaviors and use that to tell your brand story. You need to improvise with what you've got today. So, the data that we are able to use as marketers has changed and is different across the world due to regulatory pressures, and that's a good thing. But platforms like Similarweb do give you the opportunity to look at trends at a macro level. Use that to make decisions, but don't be afraid to make what you need in terms of the tools and the data sets that you need to understand your market. And finally, when you do uncover valuable lessons amongst these projects, don't be afraid to share those with other clients and other brands so that they can also learn from those processes and develop new products and new ways to tell stories. So with that, it was a whistle-stop tour of the great onboarding. I'd like to thank you for taking the time. There was a lot in there. If anybody would like the slides that I've just gone through, you can drop me an email. My email is up on screen. It's sam@aip.media. I'd love to hear from you. Likewise, if you want to hear a little bit more about the Novavax story and any of the other of the brands that I've shown, we can also send you a fuller report into each of those. I'd be delighted if you've got any questions even now or to follow up on this session. Thanks.
Thank you, Sam. This was great. Let's maybe talk about a couple of questions that we had from different people. So one of the first things is, how do you know which KPIs to focus on to deliver the value or like the story to the clients? Like, how do you make a decision which ones are important?
I think it comes back to the brand strategy, and it needs to support longevity. I think that's key. Any KPI that does not acknowledge the fact that success will be driven immediately over the midterm and the long term is the wrong KPI. And that's why focusing on the customer enables you to do that and be more effective across all of the channels that you may be working in.
Do you ever give a pushback to your clients? Because when in my time in agencies is that a lot of clients ask for KPIs which don't really matter. So we had to actually tell them, okay, why do you want this KPI? Does it ever happen in your case as well?
I'd say a gentle nudge rather than a pushback.
Yeah, no, that's a great way.
Yes is the answer, but the thing is, you have to understand that clients know more about their organization and their market potentially than the agency does at the outset. But it's our job to be able to interpret that particular situation. And it's certainly our job to challenge them to think about the things that really matter, not just the things that are immediately obvious.
Yeah, and the second question is something that I think been a theme in agencies for quite some time. I think it started to be pushed, I think, from HubSpot for a long time. But do you think agencies should become more of consultancies and engage with clients on more strategic level during this time, especially now when the problems are not just we need more revenue from paid search, but we need to actually solve strategic problems, find opportunities in the market, and like see how the consumer behavior changes because they don't know what's going on? Do you think this shift to more consultative approach instead of just agency thinking is something that we need to like change our mindset about?
Yes, 100%. And I think all of the best agencies have always done that anyway. And actually, I think that agencies often have perhaps not been able to sell themselves well enough based on the consultative thinking that they deliver. Because I don't necessarily say it's a shift. I think actually great agencies always deliver beyond just providing a series of processes or services. Mm-hmm. But the complexity that we face and the challenges that brands will face are such that an agency needs to be able to flex and integrate with that brand specifically, and that requires business consultancy more than executional expertise.
Do you also use more data when is the data more required in that kind of approach? Do you do more research on it as well?
Not necessarily more data, because actually more data doesn't help the problem. And actually, many of our clients have more data than they can handle. But the challenge that they have, or the challenge that they face, and the value that an agency brings is the organizing, the understanding, and the chipping away to find that insight, because that's where people are struggling. Collecting data is easy, identifying insight is difficult.
So it's like actually finding the way to make it valuable and finding the real insight that matters to the company.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Another one we have is, how have these data-driven story approaches changed the way you actively approach potential clients? Do you use it for your potential client search as well?
Yes, 100%. So one of the things that we often find when we pitch for and win, and sometimes don't win, new clients, is that often the brief will be quite prescriptive in what they're looking for. And actually that's often the wrong way of approaching the challenge or the problem or the opportunity. And it's our job to potentially challenge that way of thinking. And it's our job to craft a narrative for our solutions that helps them solve the problem in a different way. And we'll always use data in that approach and selling our story, but actually trying to push the client brief back, so to say, well, actually the solution might not be these set of channels or these sets of territories or this sets of advertising principles, and actually it could be done in a completely different way. And that enables us to build stronger partnerships with our clients. I think longer partnerships and ultimately drive better results.
No, I think that's a great answer. And I think we're done with our questions. So Sam, if anything, you want to add anything as well, but this was a great webinar. Thanks a lot for your help, and thanks a lot for putting all of this together.
Cheers, Thomas. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Do get in touch if you have any questions. Cheers, guys.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.